Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the ruffled, candlelit disaster that was sex and romance in Victorian England, a time when the height of seduction was showing someone your ankle and the average bed squeaked louder than a haunted accordion. If you think modern dating is awkward, just wait until you meet people who believed a strong wind could cause pregnancy, or that table legs needed to be covered for decency's sake. So before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Somehow, it's always 2 a.m. somewhere, and that's probably when Victorian couples scheduled their most uncomfortable moments. Now, dim those lights, put a fan on for that luxurious background hum, and tuck yourself in. Maybe even wrap your own ankles in a Modesty blanket, just in case any scandalous breezes come through. Let's pause for a second. How did Victorians date when talking about knees was basically foreplay? Did anyone actually understand where babies came from? Did married couples ever see each other naked? Or was it just a series of dramatic reveals involving 5 layers of linen? What was the deal with those infamous chastity belts? And did anyone ever actually use one? How long would you last at a Victorian dinner party, seated next to a guy who thinks table salt is an aphrodisiac? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1855 in the heart of London. You're in a freezing bedroom that smells faintly of coal, mothballs, and mysterious Victorian shame. The city is shrouded in fog, and you, my friend, are about to discover the sex life of Victorians. Good luck. It's the early evening in a modest but overstuffed drawing room. You're perched on the edge of a brocade settee, clutching a teacup as if it's a lifeline, and doing your best to avoid direct eye contact with the only eligible person in the room. A person who is, at this exact moment, also studying the intricacies of a floral-patterned rug. Your heart races. Is it love? Or is it just the after-effects of that second cup of heavily caffeinated tea served by a maid who seems personally invested in your romantic failure? Across the room, your potential sweetheart tries to signal interest. But since this is Victorian England, that means a brief glance, 3 seconds, maximum, followed by a flush so violent you worry it might be an early sign of consumption. No one dares speak first, lest they breach the intricate etiquette that governs every movement, word, and sideways glance. You find yourself envying the goldfish in the parlour aquarium, who at least don't have to worry about the proper number of syllables in a greeting. Enter the chaperone. Aunt Mildred, who is half bat, half vulture, and entirely immune to subtlety. Her only hobbies are needlepoint and sabotaging the course of true love. She hovers like a small, determined thundercloud, ready to swoop in at the faintest whiff of flirtation. Did your pinky finger just brush against the teacup saucer in a manner that could be construed as suggestive? Aunt Mildred has already made a note of it in her daily record of scandalous incidents, which is a real handwritten thing. The conversation, if you can call it that, consists of reading aloud from improving literature or complimenting the weather. There is no banter, no witty repartee. Instead, you exchange sentences about atmospheric pressure while frantically trying to remember the rules for how long a lady can gaze out the window before it becomes a declaration of undying passion. Eventually, there's a promenade in the garden. Not alone, obviously. You are flanked on one side by your would-be lover and on the other by the human firewall that is Aunt Mildred. The 3 of you shuffle awkwardly past hedges and gooseberry bushes, discussing topics that are either too dull to remember or so excruciatingly formal that even the garden gnomes roll their eyes. Your beloved manages a whispered good evening. You nearly faint from the thrill. But here's the catch. Every step of this dance is catalogued. There are rules about how many times you can meet before it's considered a proposal. Rules about which flowers you're allowed to accept. Violets mean devotion, but red roses are basically Victorian sexting, and rules about gloves. You must never be seen in public without gloves, lest someone deduce that you have hands and therefore, possibly, other body parts. On rare occasions, You might sneak a note, a folded slip of paper pressed into a gloved hand, containing prose so restrained it would make a modern text message seem like a steamy love letter. The risk of interception is high. Servants are notorious for reading your correspondence before you do, and then passing it along to Aunt Mildred for safekeeping in her archive of moral decline. If you're lucky, the entire ordeal will end with a formal courtship, meaning you now have permission to sit together in silence for several months, writing poetry about moonlight and the aforementioned wallpaper. Eventually, a proposal is made, not in person, but through an exchange of stiff, official letters between your respective families' legal advisors. Congratulations! You survived Victorian courtship, a game in which the only prize is a lifetime of shared awkwardness and a deep mutual appreciation for well-upholstered furniture. And somewhere in the corner, Aunt Mildred is still watching. Just in case. You're at a crowded ball, palms sweating. Forget Tinder. Your only hope is a complicated language of subtle fan movements. 1 flick means I'm interested, 2 flicks means I'm bored, and 3 flicks probably means your mother is watching from the shadows. Hope you memorized the code. Victorian flirtation wasn't for amateurs. It was an Olympic-level spectator sport, judged not by medals, but by how well you could communicate secret longing without ever actually speaking. The fan is your weapon of choice, a seemingly innocent accessory that doubles as a Morse code transmitter for the terminally repressed. You clutch it with a white-knuckled grip, mentally reviewing the rules, open slowly to show intrigue, snap shut to express outrage, and if in doubt, just pretend you have a sudden interest in the wallpaper pattern. The stakes are high, 1 wrong flutter, and you've accidentally proposed marriage to the vicar's second cousin. The ballroom is a symphony of nervous energy. Skirts swishing, shoes squeaking, and the faint but ever-present scent of boiled cabbage wafting from the buffet. You're standing in a line of hopeful young people, all pretending not to stare at one another, while an orchestra bravely attempts a waltz that's 3 beats ahead of everyone's dancing ability. Your fan is poised. Your would-be suitor stands across the room, trying to look nonchalant while dabbing at his forehead with a lace handkerchief that probably belongs to his mother. You attempt a subtle half-circle motion with your fan, which, according to the book Phonology, The Art of Covert Communication, translates to "let's meet in the conservatory." Unfortunately, your wrist cramps halfway through, and now you've signaled beware of pickpockets instead. Your suitor, terrified and confused, nearly drops his monocle into the punch bowl. The chaperones exchange glances. You soldier on, pretending this was your plan all along. Aunt Mildred, who doubles as both chaperone and world-weary codebreaker, is stationed at the edge of the room, eyes narrowed, keeping a detailed mental ledger of fan-based misdemeanors. Every so often, she raises her own fan, a black, ominous rectangle, which universally signals, "Stop whatever you're doing. I can and will tell your mother." Several nervous suitors wilt under her gaze. Back in the action, the true art of fan language isn't just in the flicks and flourishes, it's about reading the room. Does that girl really mean I love you with her rapid fluttering? Or is she just trying to clear the smoke from the lamp? Is that "come closer," or I'm being attacked by a moth? Ambiguity is everywhere. The result is an evening filled with misunderstandings, accidental rivalries, and at least one incident of someone fainting when all they meant to do was ask for another glass of lemonade. Modern dating apps have nothing on this system. With Tinder, you swipe left or right. Here, a sideways tilt of your fan can mean "meet me by the potted fern." Or, if you're holding it in your left hand instead of your right, "my father disapproves of you and has a sword." Even seasoned veterans get lost in translation. The only universal gesture is when the fan is dropped entirely, which means I give up. Please let me escape. As the night wears on, you attempt one final desperate maneuver, a rapid opening and closing of your fan, meant to convey you have beautiful eyes and I would like to compliment your sideburns. Instead, you drop the fan. It skitters across the floor, slides under a table, and is promptly retrieved by a helpful, if confused, footman who hands it back, with the sort of look usually reserved for people who claim to see ghosts. Somehow, against all odds, your suitor deciphers your intentions. You exchange a brief, triumphant glance. You've survived another round of Victorian fan flirtation, having said absolutely nothing out loud and yet somehow confessed your undying affection, fended off 3 rivals, and reassured Aunt Mildred that you're a model of restraint. As you leave the ballroom, you realize you've developed a newfound respect for modern emojis and a cramp in your wrist that will last until the next season of courting begins. But for one shining moment, you've mastered the art of flirting in a language no one really understands. And in Victorian England, that's as close to romance as it gets. Imagine a world where the most erotic thing you could see was an exposed ankle. In Victorian England, even table legs got little fabric skirts to avoid exciting anyone's imagination. Your own legs are safely hidden, but now you're eyeing the piano stool with suspicion. Welcome to the land of maximum modesty, where even the suggestion of a calf could start a family feud. Your daily wardrobe consists of enough fabric to tent the Crystal Palace, layered carefully so that not a single inch of forbidden flesh is glimpsed. The only people who get to see your ankles on a regular basis are you, your laundry maid, and possibly your undertaker. And let's be honest, nobody's excited about that last one. It's the mid-afternoon, and you're sitting primly in the parlour. Outside, a gentle London drizzle is falling. Inside, there's a sense of danger in the air. A faint breeze lifts your skirt just half an inch above the standard, legally non-threatening level. You yank it down in a panic. This is the Victorian equivalent of accidentally liking your ex's photo on Instagram. Scandal could be moments away. Your mother, sitting across from you in a fortress of lace, notices your near-ankle event and gasps so loudly the dog jumps. She immediately checks the room for witnesses and then reminds you, yet again, of cousin Edith, who once showed a hint of shin at a summer picnic and was never invited to garden parties again. Poor Edith. Doomed to social exile, all because she tried to reach for a jam tart a little too enthusiastically. Even furniture is not safe from the tyranny of modesty. Every table, every sofa leg, every piano stool is covered in ruffled, hand-stitched fabric petticoats. The story goes that a careless guest once made eye contact with a bare chair leg and needed 3 weeks of smelling salts to recover. No one's entirely sure if that's true, but it's repeated at every sewing circle just in case. Of course, this extreme modesty has ripple effects. When the average Victorian couple gets engaged, there's a good chance neither of them has ever seen more than the other's wrist. Courtship becomes a game of intense imagination, with minor accidents, like a glove slipping off during a waltz, sparking years of scandalous rumours. For every inch of skin hidden, gossip grows exponentially. Did you hear that Mrs. Parker's daughter was seen with a bare elbow? In public? That's practically a proposal. You, meanwhile, are living in a world where fashion is both armour and prison. Layers upon layers. Bloomers, petticoats, stockings, boots, laced so tightly, you wonder if circulation is just an urban legend. Getting dressed takes an hour, undressing, even longer. Your shoes are engineered to prevent any accidental peeking, a feat that mostly results in you tripping up the stairs twice a week. Men are not immune to this madness. Gentlemen's trousers are designed to be as shapeless as possible, ensuring not even the outline of a knee can cause chaos. Even mentioning the word ankle in mixed company is enough to make half the room spill their tea and the other half pretend they didn't hear. Yet, despite all the rules, Victorians find ways to push boundaries. At the seaside, daring young women hike their skirts a full inch above the boot to paddle in the water, while the men avert their eyes, pretending to be fascinated by seaweed. In Paris, there are rumours of scandalous dancers who display entire calves, but that's France, and everyone agrees the French are beyond hope. Sometimes, late at night, you contemplate the absurdity of it all. The fuss, the frills, the relentless anxiety over a body part that spends most of its time trapped in wool socks. And you realise, The scandal of the ankle isn't really about skin, it's about a society so nervous, it tries to outrun its own imagination. So you tuck your feet in, adjust your skirt, and resolve to keep your ankles as mysterious as the piano stools. After all, some secrets are better left under wraps. It's time to get dressed. This is less a sensual ritual and more an Olympic event. You're wrapped in 4 layers of starched linen, a corset, 2 petticoats, and, if you're lucky, a garment called drawers that could double as a canvas tent. Seduction now takes 3 hours and a crowbar. Welcome to the Victorian dressing room, the site of the least sexy transformation in history. There are no sultry glances in the mirror, just a growing sense of resignation as each new layer adds another degree of separation between you and anything resembling physical intimacy. Your maid, if you have one, is your pit crew, darting around with laces, pins, and the sort of grim efficiency usually reserved for mummification. The only thing being unveiled is your total lack of circulation. First, there's the chemise, a shapeless shift that offers the erotic allure of a dish towel. Then, the corset, which is a sort of early gym membership you never asked for. You brace yourself, grab the bedpost, and hold your breath as your waist is cinched until your organs become pen pals. There's a reason so many Victorian women fainted at the slightest provocation. They were operating at about 60% lung capacity and 110% stubbornness. If you manage to exhale, it's only because someone loosened your stays by accident. Over the corset come the petticoats, which, despite their innocent name, could insulate a small family in winter. Each petticoat adds bulk and heat, transforming your silhouette from human to unfortunate lampshade. Movement becomes an exercise in physics. If you want to sit down, you need to calculate the trajectory of your skirt so you don't knock over a candle or inadvertently set fire to the dog. Let's not forget the infamous drawers. These are the original granny panties, designed to cover everything from waist to mid-calf, with all the allure of a ship's sail and about as much airflow. Some versions are even open-crotched, which is less titillating than it sounds and more a grudging concession to basic bathroom logistics. No one in history has ever looked in the mirror and thought, yes, this is the look. After that come the stockings, garters, and, if you're really going for gold, a crinoline cage. The crinoline is essentially wearable scaffolding, a giant hoop skirt built to enforce maximum personal space. The more ambitious crinolines can span several feet, transforming doorways into obstacle courses and social gatherings into a series of polite collisions. There are historical accounts of women getting stuck in carriage doors, swept off piers by a strong breeze, or nearly airborne during storms. Victorian fashion, not just anti-arousal, but also an extreme sport. Gentlemen don't get off much easier. Victorian menswear consists of more layers than a geological cross-section. Undershirts, shirts, waistcoats, vests, cravats, frock coats, and trousers with a rise so high you could store a family secret in the pocket. Add a top hat, gloves, and boots polished to a mirror shine, and you have the Victorian male, dapper, dignified, and possibly in need of a rescue party if he tries to undress himself. By the time the average couple makes it to the bedroom, the mood has been thoroughly extinguished by a combination of exhaustion, frustration, and the lurking fear that someone's mother might burst in at any moment to adjust your collar. Victorian seduction is less about whispered promises and more about successfully locating your spouse beneath the folds. If you hear something rustling, it might not even be them, it could just be the starch settling. In the end, the Victorian wardrobe does its job with ruthless efficiency. It keeps everyone's passions firmly in check, muffled beneath 100 buttons and a sense of moral superiority. So the next time you slip into pajamas, spare a thought for your ancestors, who needed a team of assistants, half a day, and the blessing of 3 bishops just to get undressed. You're not feeling well, probably because your corset is squeezing your lungs into ravioli. Luckily, the doctor prescribes a nice faint on the velvet sofa, followed by a healthy dose of opium and an electrotherapy session that sounds suspiciously like a Victorian vibrator prototype. This is what passes for foreplay. Welcome to the wonderland of Victorian medicine, where half the population is being treated for hysteria, a diagnosis so vague it covers everything from boredom to indigestion to the dangerous habit of having an opinion. The prescribed remedy for any complaint, female or otherwise, is a brisk swoon onto the nearest fainting couch, a piece of furniture specifically designed for dramatic collapses and light gossip. The fainting couch is the Swiss Army knife of Victorian society. Chaise longue, psychiatrist's chair, and all-purpose escape route from conversations about wallpaper. As you clutch your pearls and drift gracefully onto the couch, the household springs into action. Someone fetches the smelling salts, a bottle of ammonium carbonate so pungent it could wake the dead and possibly embalm them at the same time. A sympathetic aunt wafts them under your nose. If that doesn't do the trick, there's always a spare child nearby to wave a fan with the subtlety of a wind tunnel. Once you've revived, it's time for the real medicine: opium, laudanum, or perhaps a nice glass of sherry. Victorian pharmacies are well stocked with products that would put modern controlled substances to shame. Cocaine lozenges for toothache, opium syrups for coughs, and bottles of Dr. Sneath's magic elixir for everything else. If you're especially lucky, the doctor prescribes a holiday at the seaside, which in practice means 2 weeks of freezing walks in damp boots and an increased risk of seagull-related mishaps. But for many women, the most infamous prescription is for hysteria. This all-purpose diagnosis is blamed on wandering wombs, an excess of imagination, or the simple fact of not being a man. Hysteria treatments are a goldmine for Victorian physicians, who employ a dizzying array of therapies: hot baths, cold baths, vigorous exercise, gentle strolls, and, in more advanced cases, pelvic massage with a series of increasingly elaborate devices powered by foot pedal, clockwork, or whatever was lying around in the shed. This is the era when inventing the electric vibrator was considered both medical progress and a convenient way to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Of course, men aren't immune to medical whimsy. Any display of nerves, melancholy, or fatigue is swiftly labelled as nervous exhaustion, to be treated with absolute bed rest and possibly a firm lecture about pulling oneself together. The only acceptable reason for a man to faint is from overexposure to the stock market, in which case the cure is brandy and a reassuring letter from the bank. Throughout all of this, the fainting couch remains at the centre of Victorian life. It's where secrets are shared, proposals are made, and scandalous novels are read in fits and starts between restorative collapses. Furniture catalogues compete to design the faintiest, most swoonable couches on the market, now with extra velvet for optimal dramatic effect. The truly fashion-forward family owns several, one in every parlour, so no one has to stagger too far when the vapours strike. Yet, for all the drama, there's a quiet truth beneath the chaos. Much of this suffering is self-inflicted. Corsets squeeze, diets starve, and the relentless quest for decency leaves everyone gasping for air, literally and figuratively. The medical profession, meanwhile, does its best to keep up, handing out prescriptions that read like the recipe for a Victorian fever dream. So you settle into your fainting couch, riding out the waves of dizziness and opium until your doctor pronounces you restored. You've survived another day of medical marvels and mysterious ailments, your dignity intact, and your corset only slightly less forgiving than the healthcare system. Time for a restorative nap. After all, you'll need your strength for the next round of polite fainting. You want romance, but your only lighting is a flickering candle and a gas lamp that smells like eggs. The shadows make everyone look haunted, and your come-hither stare mostly comes across as a plea for rescue. Welcome to the Victorian parlour, where mood lighting is less about seduction and more about hoping you don't accidentally ignite your own sleeve. It's evening, which means the sun has set hours ago, and the world is now illuminated by the gentle glow of open flames, each one ready to turn the room into an impromptu insurance claim. Your host insists it's atmospheric. What it really is is an exercise in squinting at people's faces and hoping you're not flirting with a sofa cushion by mistake. The candlelight, at least, is familiar. Beeswax if you're wealthy, tallow if you're not. Beeswax gives off a faint scent of honey and nobility. Tallow smells like last Tuesday's stew and gives everything a charming yellow tinge, so that your skin looks less like porcelain and more like mildly jaundiced marble. The candles are arranged in elegant candelabras, designed to look sophisticated, but mostly acting as little wax fountains dripping molten doom onto every available surface. Then there's the gas lamp, the marvel of modern invention, and also the reason every Victorian city smells like a breakfast gone wrong. The gaslight sits in the corner, hissing gently and producing a subtle aroma of hard-boiled eggs left in the sun. Lighting it is an ordeal involving long tapers, careful timing, and a whispered prayer that it doesn't explode. If you manage to light it without singeing your eyebrows, you're considered a catch. Most conversations take place in a haze of gas and uncertainty, where every compliment sounds more like a diagnosis. Shadows flicker on the walls, casting grotesque shapes and giving the room an unintentional haunted house vibe. Your romantic interest sits across from you, half her face beautifully illuminated, the other half lost in the kind of darkness that suggests she's plotting your downfall. You try your best at a smouldering glance, but in the shifting gloom, it comes off as mild gastrointestinal distress. She replies with what might be a smile, or possibly a warning not to sit on the cat. You can't really tell. Reading each other's expressions becomes an Olympic sport. Did he just wink, or was that a trick of the flame? Was that a flirtatious smirk, or did her bonnet catch fire again? Every gesture is up for interpretation. In this light, everyone's features are mysterious and tall, dark, and handsome is less an ideal and more an unfortunate side effect of poor visibility. If you want to actually see your beloved, you can try moving closer to the candles, but this carries its own hazards. Victorian clothing, particularly for women, is basically a series of elaborate tinderboxes, lace, ribbons, and enough starched petticoats to ensure a single wayward spark could kick off an unplanned fireworks display. It's a wonder half the romantic letters from the era aren't just apologies for singed fringe and burned eyebrows. As the evening drags on, the air grows thicker, partly with romance, mostly with smoke. Your eyes water gently. The gas lamp starts to sputter ominously, which means you may soon be plunged into total darkness, forced to rely on the chemistry between you and your companion, though by this point, that chemistry is mostly sulfur and carbon monoxide. Desperate for real atmosphere, someone suggests moving outside to the garden, where the only lighting is the moon and the ever-present London fog. Here, your date's silhouette is even more mysterious, and you both have to guess whether that's the rose bush or the neighbour's sheep between you. It's hard to tell, but at least you're unlikely to set anything alight. At last, the evening comes to a close. You make your farewells, possibly to the correct person, and stumble home with your heart fluttering and your eyelashes singed. And as you crawl into bed, you make a silent vow. Tomorrow you're flirting by daylight, or not at all. You receive a calling card. Did they fold the corner? Are the edges crisp? The wrong crease can end a courtship. And don't even think about writing dear unless you're ready for marriage, scandal, or both. Welcome to the dizzying world of Victorian communication, where every message is booby-trapped with social expectations, and the local postman probably knows more about your love life than you do. The day begins with a small pile of envelopes on the silver tray in the hallway. Each is an unopened Pandora's box of coded messages, cards, notes, invitations, and occasionally passive-aggressive reminders from your Aunt Constance that you still haven't RSVP'd to her Thursday luncheon. The calling card is the business card of the soul. Its size, thickness, and, crucially, the sharpness of its edges speak volumes. A folded upper right corner might mean condolences for your recent loss, but a fold in the lower left could suggest I wish to pay a social visit, Or possibly I have a new bonnet I'd like to show off. The possibilities are endless, and the risk of catastrophic misunderstanding is constant. More than one romance has ended because someone folded a corner with the sort of reckless abandon usually reserved for anarchists. But let's say you've survived the calling card gauntlet. Now comes the matter of correspondence. Writing a letter in Victorian England is a bit like defusing a bomb, but with more ink stains and greater potential for long-term emotional fallout. You must choose your salutation with care. My dearest if you're engaged, dear miss if you're still on formal terms, and esteemed friend if you want to sound like you're about to challenge them to a duel. Every sentence is an exercise in self-restraint. Do not mention bodily functions, the weather if it's too hot, or your actual feelings unless you want the letter to be read aloud by someone's mother, who keeps a scrapbook of questionable correspondence. Sign off with yours sincerely for acquaintances, yours affectionately for close friends, and yours forever if you're prepared to elope by moonlight. Even your choice of ink color is judged. Black for mourning, blue for optimism, and red only if you're sending a bill or a declaration of war. But there's still the dreaded handwriting. Victorian penmanship is less a style and more a test of patience and wrist strength. Loops, swirls, and careful spacing are non-negotiable. A single blot could be interpreted as a sign of weak moral fibre. The postman, naturally, is the first line of social defence. He will notice if you receive more letters than you send, and he absolutely will share this knowledge with your neighbours. Once your letter is posted, it becomes public property. Servants may intercept, steam open, and pass judgment before it ever reaches its intended recipient. If you're feeling brave, you might send a perfumed note, but beware. Too much scent and you risk accusations of wantonness. Too little, and you seem cold. There are stories of romances dashed on the rocks of lavender water. The ultimate act of trust, of course, is the love letter, penned by candlelight, sealed with trembling wax, and then delivered into the hands of fate and possibly half the domestic staff. It may be months before you receive a reply, and even then, it could be intercepted by a vengeful sibling who uses it for blackmail, or worse, as a bookmark in a cookery manual. In the Victorian etiquette minefield, every word is a weapon, and every gesture an opportunity for disaster. Friendships are won or lost by the placement of a comma. Marriages begin and end on the strength of a folded card. There are entire manuals devoted to the subject. Thick books listing rules for every occasion, none of which are ever fully understood by anyone except the one person waiting to catch you out. So you set down your pen, hands aching, heart fluttering, and hope for the best. If you're lucky, your intentions will survive the relentless judgment of relatives, rivals, and the postman's sharp eyes. If not, well, there's always next season's calling cards. Everywhere you go, there's a chaperone, a living, breathing romance firewall. She's watching, judging, and armed with a glare that could peel paint off the walls. Good luck getting any alone time. She hasn't blinked since 1842. In Victorian England, the chaperone isn't just a person. She's a presence. Like a well-upholstered ghost, she floats from drawing room to garden path, her mission clear: prevent anything resembling romance before the ink is dry on the wedding license. At every social gathering, she lurks nearby, sometimes knitting, sometimes pretending to read, but always, always listening. You can't even sneeze without her quietly marking it down in her mental scandal ledger. Imagine a world where every conversation, every side-eye, every sigh across a crowded room is subject to immediate review. Flirtation isn't a private game. It's a full-contact sport, and the referee is your Aunt Gertrude, who hasn't smiled since the Napoleonic Wars. She's seen it all, suspects the worst, and considers hand-holding to be a gateway crime. You and your would-be sweetheart have just made accidental eye contact, and Gertrude's eyebrow twitches, a sign that court-martial is imminent. Taking a walk in the garden? Don't forget your chaperone. She's 2 steps behind, walking slower than continental drift, but always close enough to hear if anyone so much as whispers the word elopement. The Victorians invented the promenade not for fresh air, but so the chaperone could better triangulate her surveillance. Benches are placed at strategic intervals, just far enough apart for a couple to dream of privacy, but close enough for the chaperone to overhear every romantic disaster. Inside, the parlor is just another arena. You want to pass your beloved a note? Good luck. The chaperone's eyes never leave your hands. You consider dropping it on the carpet, but you know she'll retrieve it, read it aloud, and offer unsolicited grammar corrections before you get a chance. Even the family dog is on her side, trained to bark if anyone gets too close to the potted ferns, nature's original tripwire. Chaperones are expert conversationalists. Not in the sense of adding anything interesting, but in their uncanny ability to appear just as things are getting personal. You and your sweetheart are finally discussing feelings, real ones, with verbs and everything, when she materializes in the doorway, brandishing a tray of cucumber sandwiches. "Isn't it lovely weather?" she says, with all the subtlety of a foghorn. In an instant, the moment is lost, drowned in tea and relentless small talk. It gets worse at dances. You dream of a waltz, just the two of you, lost in the music. Instead, you're sandwiched between the chaperone and a distant cousin, both watching like hawks. If you stray off the approved dance path, more than a hand's width between you, less than two, you risk immediate removal from the dance floor and a lecture on the dangers of overexertion. The only heat in the room comes from the chaperone's glare, which could defrost a Victorian icebox at 20 paces. And heaven help you if you actually manage a moment alone. 5 minutes in the conservatory, and suddenly you're engaged, or worse, expected to explain yourself to 3 generations of family at breakfast. The chaperone's job isn't just to prevent scandal, it's to prevent opportunity. If you're caught without supervision, you might as well start shopping for hats and memorizing your vows. Over time, you develop a 6th sense for her movements. A cough in the hallway? She's lurking. The faint scent of lavender and disapproval? She's nearby. A tea tray rattling for no apparent reason? She's closing in. You and your sweetheart learn to communicate with raised eyebrows and coded phrases, but it's like trying to win a chess match while your opponent eats all the pieces. In the end, you realize the chaperone is less an enemy and more a test. If you can find love under her relentless supervision, well, you've earned it. Besides, she was young once too. Maybe that's why. When she finally blinks, you see just a hint of a smile. Or maybe it's just gas. In Victorian England, it's hard to be sure. It's proposal season. You're supposed to declare your undying love with a trembling speech, a posy of violets, and the implied financial stability of your future estate. Say the wrong thing and risk being banished to the friend zone, which is a real Victorian term, but spelled spinster. Proposals in Victorian England are less about spontaneous passion and more about tactical warfare. Every eligible bachelor is either nervously plotting his next move or being chased by a matchmaking aunt with the tenacity of a bloodhound and a list of local heiresses that reads like a racing program. Forget dropping down on one knee at sunset. There's a decent chance you'll be intercepted by a chaperone wielding a tray of shortbread and a strong opinion about your prospects. The setting is everything. The garden is a classic. Flowers, moonlight, and just enough shrubbery to suggest privacy while still allowing 3 cousins and a passing vicar to witness the moment and provide unsolicited commentary. The parlour is another option, but that comes with the added bonus of your beloved's father, reading the newspaper 3 feet away and occasionally lowering it to clear his throat at strategic intervals. You arrive with a carefully selected bouquet, violets for Modesty, lilies for Puberty, and, if you're feeling bold, a single rose that says, "I am prepared to ruin my reputation for you," but only within the bounds of polite society. You've rehearsed your speech all week, by the mirror, by candlelight, possibly to your pet spaniel, who is now more emotionally invested in this proposal than you are. There's an etiquette for every gesture. Drop the bouquet, and you risk symbolizing impending misfortune. Take her hand too early, and you might be asked to leave through the servant's entrance. There are guides, pamphlets, and, if you're particularly unlucky, your own mother standing by with a copy of How to Secure a Yes in 3 polite sentences or less. Finally, the moment arrives. You kneel, never on both knees, that's begging, and certainly not on bare carpet, too forward. Your beloved stares at you with the wide-eyed panic of someone who's just been asked to solve a mathematical equation in public. The air is thick with the scent of violets and generational expectations. You launch into your speech, which is less a declaration of love and more a PowerPoint presentation on your future earning potential. There's talk of estates, sensible investments, and the possibility of 2 parlours, not 1. You mention your affection, but only in the most abstract terms, like deep regard and esteem so profound I could almost swoon. If you dare to utter the word love too soon, half the family faints and the other half drafts the wedding banns. Now comes her reply. It might be immediate, a demure yes whispered behind a fan. Or it could be delayed, routed through 3 aunts and a legal advisor. The answer, when it finally arrives, is often cloaked in more mystery than the Sphinx's favourite riddle. A simple perhaps can leave you in social limbo until Christmas. Of course, there are hazards at every turn. Say something too romantic, and you risk being labelled a poet, unemployable, not romantic enough, and you're dismissed as emotionally unavailable. Even if you do everything right, a rogue peacock, a sudden rainstorm, or the unexpected arrival of Cousin Winifred's brass band can derail the whole event. If you're lucky enough to receive a yes, the engagement is instantly announced, often by your future mother-in-law, who sprints to the nearest telegraph office and then drafts a newsletter for the parish. Congratulations. You are now betrothed, which is a fancy word for legally obliged to spend the rest of your life with someone whose ankles you may have glimpsed once, briefly through a hedge. Proposals in Victorian England aren't just about romance. They're about survival, navigating a maze of social pitfalls and family expectations with your dignity, mostly, intact. And if you do it all right, you may just earn the greatest Victorian reward of all, a future together, sealed with the world's most awkward, supervised handshake. Finally, you're married. Congratulations. Time for the most stressful event of your life, the wedding night. Neither of you has seen anyone naked before, and you're both convinced that holding hands might cause fainting. One of you is wearing socks for protection. This is the moment every Victorian advice book has been leading up to, and none of them have been remotely helpful. You're sitting at the edge of a 4-poster bed that creaks with every anxious heartbeat, surrounded by so many ruffles and embroidered pillows that it feels more like you're camping in a linen store than about to embark on marital bliss. The candlelight flickers, throwing suspiciously judgmental shadows across the room. Someone, probably your new mother-in-law, has scattered rose petals everywhere, as if floral debris might make this any less terrifying. You and your new spouse exchange a nervous glance. The conversation is stilted. You consider complimenting their nightcap, but worry it might be too forward. You both clutch your respective marriage advice pamphlets, yours titled On the Duties of Husbands, theirs for the Timid Bride. What to expect? And realize that neither booklet covers the mechanics of undressing when you're wearing 7 layers of clothing and at least 3 emotional traumas. In true Victorian style, your nightwear is about as alluring as a potato sack. If you're a bride, your nightgown is high-necked, long-sleeved, and so modest you could wear it to a church picnic and nobody would bat an eye. If you're a groom, you're in your marriage shirt. An actual historical garment designed to keep all the important bits completely hidden, with a handy flap in case things get too exciting. Socks remain firmly in place. Because everyone knows bare feet are a gateway sin, neither of you is entirely sure what happens next. Sex education is, at best, a collection of vague metaphors delivered by someone's great aunt, all references to planting seeds and tending the marital garden. There is a lot of blushing, shuffling, and the polite avoidance of eye contact. someone sneezes, someone else apologizes for sneezing. You consider hiding under the bed, but fear you might not find your way out until spring. The entire household seems to be listening outside the door. The family dog whines, possibly in sympathy. Somewhere down the hallway, your new relatives are taking bets on whether there will be heirs by Christmas. There's a tradition of friends and siblings banging pots and pans outside the bedroom to encourage the happy couple. An event known as charivari that's less romantic and more like being cheered on by drunken pirates. Privacy is not on the menu. The bed itself doesn't help. It's stuffed with horsehair, smells faintly of mothballs, and produces ominous squeaks every time you so much as exhale. Your new spouse tries to break the ice with a joke about the weather, but both of you are sweating so much the sheets start to stick. You attempt to offer a reassuring smile, but it comes out as a grimace that would not be out of place at a dental extraction. Eventually, after much fumbling, a near wardrobe malfunction, and several false starts, including an incident involving a stuck button and an emergency candle relight, you both manage to settle in side by side, exhausted by the sheer logistics of Victorian modesty. Perhaps there's a kiss, shy and brief. Perhaps there's a laugh, the tension finally breaking like a thunderstorm. And maybe, just maybe, you realize that everyone else is just as clueless as you are. The world doesn't end, the furniture survives, and the mystery of marriage becomes slightly less mysterious, at least until breakfast, when Aunt Gertrude will ask how you slept, with a twinkle in her eye and a knowing smirk. Congratulations, you've survived the most awkward night of your life. It only gets easier from here. Probably. Let's talk about beds. The Victorian marital bed is less boudoir and more squeaky wooden contraption covered in horsehair and anxiety. Privacy? Only if you count a curtain that blocks exactly zero sound. You approach your new sleeping quarters as one might approach an ancient torture device, cautiously and with a healthy respect for splinters. The bed is the centerpiece of the room, but not in the glamorous, candlelit way you'd expect. No. This is the kind of centerpiece that dominates the landscape like a wooden shipwreck, promising adventure and back pain in equal measure. The frame is heavy, ornately carved, and approximately the size of a small carriage. Moving it would require at least 6 labourers, a team of oxen, and ideally a favourable wind. Let's examine the mattress. Stuffed generously with horsehair, nature's original poking mechanism, it promises an authentic, rustic experience for your entire spine. Some beds also include straw, feathers, or, for the truly unlucky, whatever was left over from last year's harvest festival. There is no memory foam here, unless you count the permanent indentation shaped suspiciously like Aunt Gertrude. Every time you lie down, a handful of horsehairs poke through the linen, reminding you that comfort is for the weak and the modern. Above the mattress, there's a fitted sheet that's been starched to the texture of corrugated cardboard. On top, a mound of pillows that serve no discernible function except to absorb household dust and display the embroidery skills of at least 4 generations of nervous relatives. The entire stack is topped with a counterpane so thick you could use it to fend off a cavalry charge, or, more realistically, as protection from the damp draft that sneaks in under the door every night. And then there's the infamous curtain. The Victorian answer to privacy. This heavy drapery hangs limply from the bed's frame, offering an illusion of seclusion. It blocks exactly no sound and only some light, so if you're hoping to whisper sweet nothings, know that every syllable will be amplified for the benefit of your curious in-laws, the resident house cat, and at least one eavesdropping servant. The curtain's main function seems to be trapping body heat and occasionally suffocating the unwary during a midnight tangle. If you're particularly fortunate, the bed also includes a tester canopy overhead, a dust-collecting architectural marvel that, when combined with the thick drapes, turns the bed into a small, climate-controlled coffin. There's nothing quite like waking up in the middle of the night in a cocoon of velvet, wondering whether you're married or being slowly embalmed. The bed itself is, of course, possessed by spirits. if not literal ghosts, then at least the groans and squeaks of 1,000 restless nights. Any movement produces an orchestra of creaks, cracks, and mysterious thumps. You shift your weight. The bed announces it to the entire household. You attempt to sit quietly. The frame lets out a sound like a medieval drawbridge. Heaven help you if you actually attempt any marital activity. The racket is enough to rouse the dead, and certainly enough to startle the family dog. Let's not forget about temperature control. In the depths of winter, your side of the bed is approximately 3 degrees warmer than the grave. You huddle together beneath 3 wool blankets, clutching a ceramic hot water bottle that leaks just enough to keep your feet cold and your mattress damp. In the summer, the bed transforms into a humid terrarium, trapping heat, sweat, and the faint aroma of last night's boiled cabbage. And yet, for all its discomfort, the Victorian marital bed is an institution. It's where secrets are whispered and overheard, where generations begin, and where every squeak is both an embarrassment and a badge of survival. As you drift off to sleep, poked by horsehair and serenaded by the bed's ancient symphony, remember, at least you're not sharing it with the family goat. Not tonight, anyway. You have questions. Nobody has answers. Victorian sex ed consists of cryptic advice from your grandmother and a medical pamphlet that strongly recommends not thinking about anything south of your collarbone. Welcome to the world's most baffling classroom, where the syllabus is written in invisible ink and every chapter ends with, "Ask your mother," but not directly. In Victorian England, puberty is treated less as a natural milestone and more as a supernatural inconvenience. The closest thing to a health class is a stern warning to stay away from bicycles, onions, and strong breezes, all believed to have suspiciously stimulating effects on the body. At the first sign of adolescence, you're issued a copy of Hints on Modesty and an extra-long nightshirt. There are no diagrams, no practical explanations, and certainly no open discussion. If you're lucky, your mother slips you a pamphlet titled What Every Young Lady Should Know, which turns out to be 20 pages about flower arranging and one very confusing paragraph on the marital embrace, which seems to involve lying very still and thinking about the Queen. Boys fare no better. They're handed books like On Manly Virtue and the Dangers of Overexcitement, featuring stern warnings about the perils of self-abuse, a term so mysterious that most young men assume it refers to running too quickly up the stairs. Should you dare to ask for clarification, your father will either cough awkwardly and change the subject to crop rotation, or, if he's feeling bold, refer you to the family doctor, who is equally unhelpful and recommends cold baths, strict discipline, and never reading French novels. Formal education is no help. School lessons cover the ancient Greeks, the Roman Empire, and algebra, but not a single word about anatomy that might actually be useful. The human body is discussed only as a collection of organs with Latin names, most of which remain theoretical until your wedding night. If you're a young woman, your entire reproductive education is a cautionary tale about not sitting on cold stone or catching the vapors. Menstruation, when mentioned at all, is described as a monthly visitor, as if Aunt Flo literally arrives on the doorstep, demanding tea and silence. Worse, the people most eager to answer your questions are the least qualified. There's always one school friend who claims to know everything, but his knowledge is a blend of overheard kitchen gossip and half-remembered Greek myths. According to him, babies are delivered by storks. Storks are available only in spring, and kissing a mirror on a full moon guarantees you'll marry a duke. Actual facts are as rare as fresh vegetables in January. Doctors, meanwhile, are still operating under the Humours theory. 4 mysterious fluids that need to be balanced, preferably by leeches, fainting, or spending a week at the seaside. If you present with unusual desires, or the urge to touch someone's hand for longer than is strictly necessary, you're prescribed a strict regimen of horse riding and not reading poetry after dark. Should you find yourself in love, or worse, curious, your options are grim. You can consult the family Bible for guidance, but Leviticus is heavy on rules and light on details. Or you can consult your grandmother, who responds with stories about the Crimean War and a firm reminder that curiosity killed the cat and also led to your Uncle Herbert's mysterious exile to Canada. So you grow up knowing that everything important is happening just out of sight, behind a fog of euphemism, metaphor, and well-meaning silence. You learn the rules. Never say the word leg in polite company. Never ask why there are so many cousins born in March. And never, ever let your imagination run wild. By the time you reach adulthood, you know more about the mating habits of hedgehogs than your own. And so, with a mixture of confusion and dread, you stumble into marriage, pamphlet in hand, ready for life's greatest mystery. Whatever it is, just remember, keep your socks on and your questions to yourself. Rumours swirl about iron undergarments and complicated contraptions meant to preserve virtue. Spoiler. These mostly exist in the fever dreams of nervous clergymen. But the real thing is social shame, strong enough to crack granite. Victorian England, you see, is a world obsessed with the idea of keeping everything, desires, ankles, even stray thoughts, neatly locked away. The chastity belt is less an actual wardrobe item and more a symbol of how much the Victorians feared anything remotely enjoyable. The reality is, very few people ever saw a real iron chastity belt outside a museum, or occasionally a medical journal written by a man with a flair for melodrama and poor metallurgy. That doesn't stop the stories, of course. You overhear them everywhere, in parlour gossip whispered in the back pews of the church, or scribbled into advice columns in magazines with names like the modest matron. Supposedly, these devices are issued to unruly daughters, careless wives, or anyone deemed at risk of falling prey to the passions. The descriptions are always absurd: iron girdles with elaborate locks, keys kept by fathers or husbands, and ominous warnings about moral hygiene. If you believed half the tales, you'd think the average Victorian household included more locksmiths than servants. Naturally, the mere rumour of such things is enough to keep most people in line. Forget the threat of iron underwear. Victorian England's true invention is peer pressure, a force far more uncomfortable than any medieval padlock. If a girl so much as blushes during a poetry reading, the entire village talks for weeks. Should a gentleman be caught looking too long at a woman's glove, her glove, not even her hand, he'll be the subject of discreet sermons about self-control for months. Still, the Victorians never met a problem they couldn't try to solve with hardware and a heavy dose of awkwardness. There were plenty of other inventions designed to keep virtue intact. There were anti-masturbation devices for boys, straps, spikes, and even bizarre metal cages for nighttime security. Some doctors even recommended sewing up pajamas or tying hands to the bedpost as a preventative measure. Comfort and practicality were clearly not on the inventor's mind. Imagine trying to sleep while wearing a device that looks like it was designed for jousting practice. Of course, none of this actually addressed the real issue. The truth is, most young Victorians were kept pure not by gadgets, but by a never-ending campaign of fear and embarrassment. Modesty was enforced by social rules so strict, even using the word underwear could spark a family meeting. The real chastity belt was invisible. It was made of glares from elderly aunts, rumours about girls who went wrong, and the ever-present threat of being written out of the will. Every so often, a genuine contraption does make its way into the historical record, usually in the possession of some overzealous reformer or eccentric baron. But for the majority, virtue is maintained by surveillance and gossip, not cold iron. If you're caught alone in the garden with a suitor, you're more likely to face a summer of icy stares and no invitations than an actual padlock. Meanwhile, real life stumbles along in spite of all this. Couples continue to find ways to pass notes, share glances, and even, scandal of scandals, hold hands beneath the tablecloth at dinner. The more rules society piles on, the more creative people become at skirting them. Victorian ingenuity isn't just for inventing steam engines, it's for inventing plausible excuses for being late home from choir practice. And so, as you button up your layers and fasten your imagination firmly in place, you realize that the chastity belt's greatest trick was never about steel or keys, but about convincing a whole society that virtue could be measured in hardware and maintained by fear. In the end, social shame did the heavy lifting, and the only real lock was the one on the parlor door. You want to avoid pregnancy. The options include vinegar, goat bladders, abstinence, or, if you're feeling scientific, rubber condoms that look and smell like something you'd use to patch a bicycle tire. Romantic. Welcome to the world of Victorian contraception, where the only thing more unreliable than your birth control method is the information you have about it. No one has invented the pill. Nobody trusts doctors enough to ask awkward questions, and the pharmacy shelf is a mad scientist's playground of herbal concoctions, alarming devices, and patent medicines promising peace of mind while offering, at best, a brief sense of adventure, and at worst, a trip to the hospital. Let's start with the classics. Abstinence, of course, is the gold standard, at least according to pamphlets written by nervous clergy and distributed by mothers who have 17 children and know better. But for those who want to live a little, there's the vinegar douche, a homemade recipe passed down through generations of desperate women and likely responsible for more household confusion than actual prevention. There's no evidence it works, but it does leave you with a lingering salad aroma, and maybe that's its own deterrent. Next, we have the barrier methods. Enter the goat bladder, nature's original balloon animal, cleaned, dried, and fashioned into a makeshift sheath. It's a process so unappealing, it's a miracle anyone ever had the nerve to try it. Slightly more advanced is the French letter, or early condom, crafted from thick, foul-smelling rubber and secured with a charming ribbon. The instructions suggest washing and reusing, so if you're looking for an icebreaker on the third date, just bring out your collection of vintage contraceptives and see who faints first. Spermicides are on the menu too, although calling them spermicides is generous. More often, it's a homemade mix of honey, quinine, or Lysol. Yes, the cleaning product. Some recipes recommend inserting a sponge soaked in lemon juice, proving once and for all that desperation breeds creativity and a remarkable pain tolerance. If you're feeling flush, there's a new product on the market, Dr. Perkins' patent preventive powder, guaranteed by absolutely nobody, and probably banned in at least 3 counties. The rhythm method is another favourite, tracking the phases of the moon, your appetite for rhubarb, or simply guessing and hoping for the best. There's plenty of prayer involved, mostly whispered late at night or muttered over boiling wash basins. Victorians believed everything could be managed with the right mix of timing, self-control, and not looking directly at each other before noon. Meanwhile, the medical profession isn't much help. Most doctors are more comfortable prescribing leeches than answering questions about the marital act. If you summon the courage to ask, you'll be handed a pamphlet urging self-restraint and shown the door. The best advice comes from your grandmother, who claims she never needed anything fancy and credits her success to woolen drawers and a determined sense of denial. Of course, all these efforts come with a healthy dose of fear. Pregnancy isn't just a physical ordeal, it's a social event, a financial calculation, and, for many, a lifelong commitment to churning out heirs or, if you're unlucky, future disappointments. The stakes are high. Every failed method means another round of gossip, another sigh from your mother-in-law, and another 9 months of inventing polite excuses for why you're craving turnips at midnight. Yet, somehow, life goes on. Children are born, households grow, and rumours circulate about secret potions, underground midwives, and mysterious women who never seem to show. And through it all, Victorians persevere, patching together science, superstition, and whatever they can find in the kitchen cupboard, reminding us that hope, prayers, and questionable chemicals will always be part of the human story. So as you tuck in your nightgown and try not to make eye contact with the bottle of vinegar on your dresser, remember, romance in Victorian England wasn't just about love. Sometimes it was about survival, and an endless willingness to improvise. You seek medical advice. The doctor prescribes leeches, cold baths, and vigorous outdoor walks. If you're a woman, hysteria is blamed for everything, and the cure is a mix of confusion and electric gadgets. Welcome to the strange, drafty waiting room of Victorian medicine, where the only thing more mysterious than your symptoms is the cure. The family doctor arrives with a top hat, sideburns of biblical proportions, and a Gladstone bag filled with horrors. Unwashed bandages, a rusty stethoscope, and a collection of bottles that would be right at home in a poisoner's pantry. He sits beside your bed, frowns, and immediately suspects your ailment is either caused by too much reading or not enough gardening. For men, the treatment plan is always the same. Get outside, breathe the fresh, sooty, coal-laden London air, and avoid strong emotions. If you complain of fatigue, the diagnosis is nervous exhaustion, prescribed remedy, vigorous chopping of wood, heroic consumption of beef, and failing all else, a robust moustache wax. If you're still under the weather, you are simply told to man up, as this is the most cost-effective medicine available. For women, the diagnosis is almost always hysteria, a word that covers everything from a headache to the desire to read novels, laugh in public, or, heaven forbid, discuss one's own health. The doctor listens gravely, nods, and prescribes a series of rituals that sound more like wizardry than healthcare. First, a brisk application of leeches. To the temples, to the ankles, or anywhere a nervous aunt suggests. The leeches do nothing except terrify the household staff and inspire several rounds of gossip. If the leeches fail, they always fail, it's time for the cold bath. An experience that's 1 part health regimen, 2 parts accidental baptism. The idea is to shock the system. In reality, you simply emerge wet, shivering, and more convinced than ever that health is a cruel Victorian prank. If you're lucky, you'll be bundled in a flannel blanket and forced to lie very still under the watchful eye of a nurse who smells faintly of gin and camphor. The real showstopper, however, is the cure for hysteria, the latest in electrotherapy. Your local physician has invested in all manner of gadgets, from vibrating chairs to clockwork massagers, most of which look like they were designed for either milking cows or launching spaceships. The doctor solemnly explains the benefits, releasing excess energy and restoring feminine calm, while you and half the women of the neighborhood queue up for a chance to try the new technology. It's not clear whether anyone feels better afterward, but everyone feels a little stranger. Of course, if gadgets and baths fail, there's always laudanum, the cure. All tincture of opium and alcohol. Just a few drops, and you'll forget your troubles, your name, and possibly how to walk. For children, a dose of soothing syrup is recommended, a potion strong enough to fell a small ox. For coughs, toothaches, or existential dread, the doctor recommends tonics, most of which contain more gin than medicine. If you happen to ask for advice about the mysteries of the bedroom, things get even more surreal. You might be told to eat more oysters, avoid spicy foods, or, in especially dire cases, sleep with a potato under your pillow. The prevailing wisdom is that sex is both dangerous and necessary, best approached in darkness, silence, and with a robust sense of denial. Any deviation is grounds for further medical intervention, possibly involving more leeches. In the end, the true prescription is this: rest, hope for the best, and never let the doctor near you with a new gadget or a fresh leech. The Victorian medical system is equal parts showmanship, superstition, and a little bit of luck. If you survive the cure, you might just outlast the disease. And if not, at least you've provided the local doctor with excellent dinner party conversation for years to come. Congratulations, you're married, which means marital relations are now a scheduled event. Once a week, if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, the vicar's wife keeps a chart and stops by to ask about your progress. Victorian romance doesn't end with, "I do." It transforms into a shared calendar appointment, penciled in somewhere between choir practice and polishing the brass candlesticks. The act itself is called Marriage Duty, and it is, by all available accounts, about as thrilling as balancing the household budget or dusting the family portrait of Great Uncle Reginald. You approach your wedded obligations with the same energy as filing taxes. Necessary, awkward, and likely to end with someone sighing in the hallway. Preparation is half the battle. It begins with the ceremonial donning of nightwear, long, buttoned nightgowns for the ladies, marriage shirts for the gents, and, in some very cautious households, gloves and, of course, socks. The bedroom is dimly lit, not for the sake of mood, but because candlelight is cheaper than therapy and nobody wants to risk catching a glimpse of their spouse's knees in a moment of passion. You each perform a complicated, unspoken dance, removing just enough layers to get the job done, but never so many that someone might have an improper thought. Then comes the communication, which is rarely verbal. There are coded coughs, meaningful glances, and the universal sign for "is it Thursday already?" A deep, resigned sigh. If you're truly feeling wild, you might reach for your spouse's hand under the covers, but even that risks scandal. Intimacy is handled with the delicacy of a diplomatic negotiation, each partner trying very hard not to startle the other or ignite the horsehair mattress. Actual instruction is in short supply. The only advice you received was from a maiden aunt who whispered, "Just close your eyes and think of England," which is as helpful as telling someone to perform a violin solo with oven mitts on. Medical advice is no better. Victorian doctors recommend moderation, not for health reasons, but because too much enjoyment is thought to drain your life force, possibly leading to gout, blindness, or a sudden compulsion to grow a beard. The encounter itself is a blend of nerves and obligation, punctuated by the squeaks and groans of a marital bed built before the invention of subtlety. You keep one ear out for suspicious footsteps in the hallway. Nobody wants to be the subject of breakfast gossip, especially with Aunt Mildred in attendance. The act is over quickly, if only because the room is freezing and both parties are wondering if the cat is still hiding under the bed. Afterwards, there's no post-coital cuddle, just an awkward scramble back into flannel, a polite goodnight, and the silent hope that the vicar's wife will skip her weekly check-in this time. Records are kept, not in diaries but in the margins of almanacs and cookbooks, disguised among recipes for fruit preserves. Every so often, the local priest delivers a sermon on the sacred duty of marriage, timed carefully for Sunday afternoons, when half the congregation is napping. And yet, beneath the bureaucracy, a strange tenderness sometimes emerges. A shy smile, a shared joke about how neither of you remembers what you look like in daylight, or a gentle squeeze of the hand as you both drift off to sleep. It's not passion as modern novels describe it, but it's partnership, the quiet, enduring sort that's built over hundreds of awkward Thursday nights. So you perform your duty with a sense of dignity, humour, and the knowledge that, for all the rules and rituals, you're not alone. Across the city, millions of Victorians are doing the exact same thing, quietly, cautiously, and occasionally with socks on. The Victorian bedroom is a symphony of strange smells: coal dust, unwashed linens, mothballs, and whatever mysterious ointments are in the bedside drawer. You're starting to miss modern air fresheners. Step through the velvet curtains, and you're greeted by an aroma best described as antique hope with bass notes of despair. The air is thick, heavy with the memory of last week's porridge, mingled with the sharp bite of coal smoke. You cross the threshold and instantly regret inhaling, but there's no turning back. The room is a patchwork of cleaning strategies, some more successful than others and most designed to frighten away not just germs but also distant relatives. Let's start with the linens. Sheets are changed only slightly more often than Queen Victoria's hairstyle. Laundering is a marathon involving copper tubs, carbolic soap, and the kind of upper body strength that could win you medals at the next Olympics. Most bedsheets are a historic record of life's accidents, tea stains from a shaky hand, mysterious splodges that nobody discusses, and the ever-present yellowing that comes from years of sleeping beneath layers of wool. Pillowcases, a smorgasbord of pomade, drool, and dreams deferred. The mattress beneath it all is a relic, horsehair stuffed, lumpy, and not to be examined too closely. In some houses, a mattress is passed down through generations, growing more haunted with each year. Occasionally, an enterprising soul flips the mattress to freshen it up, only to discover coins from the reign of George III, a petrified biscuit, and a species of moth previously unknown to science. Around the bed, mothballs wage a losing war against wool-eating invaders. Their chemical tang adds to the room's complicated bouquet. Victorian mothballs are made from camphor, naphthalene, or whatever the chemist had handy. Substances strong enough to clear the sinuses and, perhaps, the mind. Breathe deeply, and you'll remember this scent forever. Not by choice. Personal hygiene products are scattered about, each with its own distinctive whiff. Ointments for every ailment. Cold cream for chapped skin, castor oil for shiny hair, and dubious elixirs for female troubles. There's a little bottle labelled Lysol, and yes, it's the same stuff you're thinking of, only back then it was advertised as both a cleaning agent and a personal hygiene solution. A dab behind each ear, the advertisement suggests, and you're fit for polite company or at least for scaring off nosy neighbours. Air circulation is a myth. Windows are kept tightly shut to prevent miasma from entering, although the real risk is suffocating on indoor miasma first. The only breeze comes from a makeshift fan or, if you're lucky, a hole in the wall courtesy of last winter's overzealous fireplace poker. Even then, the best you can hope for is a faint waft of cabbage from the kitchen below. Rugs and draperies provide their own olfactory challenges. Heavy, plush, and never cleaned, they're a haven for dust, spilled gravy, and the occasional mouse who died chasing after a rogue raisin. Every step sends up a faint cloud of history, much of which settles gently on your nightshirt. If all else fails, Victorians embrace the art of the cover-up. Potpourri in porcelain bowls, lavender sachets tucked under pillows, and little pomanders of cloves and citrus hanging from the window latch. It's an arms race between stink and sweet, and the winner is anyone who manages to fall asleep without sneezing. Still, for all the strange smells, stains, and the questionable things living between the mattress and the wall, the Victorian bedroom is home. It's a place of dreams, whispered secrets, and the determined hope that maybe next week you'll change the sheets, or at least sprinkle a bit more Lysol around and call it progress. Think you're alone? Think again. The walls are thin, the servants are everywhere, and every creak is reported back to your in-laws. Romantic whispers have to compete with the sound of someone boiling cabbage. In Victorian England, privacy is a foreign concept, something reserved for monarchs and magicians. Your home is a hive of constant activity, populated by a rotating cast of relatives, servants, and people who seem to appear just as you're about to have a moment alone. Every hallway holds echoes, every door a listening ear, and every romantic conversation is, by necessity, conducted in the lowest possible whisper, often mistaken for a case of seasonal laryngitis. You and your beloved attempt to exchange endearments, but the acoustics are against you. Victorian houses are masterpieces of sound transmission. The floorboards creak out Morse code, the pipes gurgle with the news of the day, and the walls are so thin that even the neighbour's cat knows you had fish for dinner. Attempting to have a private conversation in such a house is like trying to perform a magic trick while wearing a bell around your neck. Every room has its own audience. The parlour is never truly empty, even if it looks deserted. You can bet there's a maid dusting behind the sofa or a child lurking beneath the tea table, scribbling down observations for later blackmail. The scullery is full of servants washing up, scrubbing, humming, and quietly noting that Mrs. Fairchild spent a suspicious amount of time in the conservatory with the vicar. Even the library, that supposed sanctuary of peace, has at least one spinster aunt cataloguing your reading habits and one butler rearranging the ink pots in alphabetical order. Night brings no relief. Every step in the hallway is magnified tenfold. You try to sneak past the grandfather clock, but it chimes the hour with the enthusiasm of a brass band, announcing your presence to anyone still awake and a few who weren't. The staircase groans beneath your weight, the bed squeaks in protest, and even the windows rattle in solidarity. Privacy is a ghost story told to frighten children. Servants are the original social network. Their ears are finely tuned to the frequencies of gossip and scandal, and their ability to relay information is nothing short of legendary. The scullery maid passes news to the cook, who tells the butler, who tells the housekeeper, who, within 20 minutes, has briefed your mother-in-law, the postman, and at least 3 people at the local bakery. If you so much as sigh too loudly, expect a concerned inquiry from Aunt Mildred and a suggestive wink from the gardener. There is no such thing as a secret. Love letters are intercepted, opened, and sometimes critiqued by a panel of maids before they ever reach their intended recipient. Every chance encounter in the garden is actually the result of careful planning, and at least 2 housemaids stationed at the windows, ready to provide running commentary. Your attempts at stealth are outmatched by a household that thrives on detection and a society that considers privacy the first step towards scandal. Even the garden, with its promise of leafy seclusion, is full of lurking dangers. The gardener is pruning the roses, the neighbour's children are climbing the fence, and the family dog follows you everywhere, ensuring that no romantic rendezvous goes undocumented. You'd have more luck finding solitude in the middle of Piccadilly Circus. So you accept the inevitable. Every word, every glance, every gentle brush of the hand is witnessed, catalogued, and reported back to the committee of family, servants, and suspicious potted plants. Privacy in a Victorian house is not so much a right as an ongoing negotiation with the architecture, with the household, and with fate itself. Eventually, you and your sweetheart learn to communicate in code, raised eyebrows, subtle gestures, and the universal language of sighs. It's not perfect, but it's enough. After all, in a house where everyone knows everything, even a fleeting moment of stolen privacy feels like the greatest romance of all. You're never really alone. The maid is tidying up, the butler is lurking in the hallway, and the cook seems to be timing your every move. It's impossible to be mysterious when everyone's already read your mail. In Victorian England, servants are everywhere, and they're always one step ahead. The social hierarchy says you're in charge. But let's be honest, everyone knows the real power in the house belongs to whoever handles the laundry and the keys to the locked cupboards. From the moment you wake up, the day is a ballet choreographed and observed by staff who know your schedule better than you do. They appear with uncanny timing, ready to plump pillows, fetch tea, and, if you dare attempt a private conversation, find a reason to reorganize the fireplace or dust the bookshelves behind your head. The maid is an unacknowledged member of every major life event. She's seen your nervous blush after receiving a letter, and she's the first to notice when that letter mysteriously disappears. She knows which dress you're wearing for which suitor, and she's perfected the art of accidentally interrupting just as you're about to say something truly personal. She tidies the bedroom while you're not in it, but somehow always manages to turn up the moment you're looking for a secret hiding place for your diary. The butler, meanwhile, is the all-seeing, all-knowing guardian of household order. His shoes are so shiny you can see your flustered reflection in them, and his expression never changes, except for the faintest twitch of an eyebrow whenever you break the rules of etiquette. He stands quietly in the hallway, polishing a silver tray and listening to every footstep. Should you attempt to sneak down for a midnight snack or a rendezvous in the conservatory, he'll be waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a lantern, a knowing nod, and a not-so-subtle reminder that the family is resting. Then there's the cook, whose influence extends far beyond the kitchen. She is the true oracle of the house, wielding power over menus, moods, and family secrets. She can tell who is in love by how much porridge gets eaten at breakfast and knows who's in trouble by the number of uneaten scones. She times the ringing of the dinner bell for maximum dramatic effect, ensuring that any whispered conversation in the drawing room is interrupted just before it gets interesting. If anyone wants to know what's really going on in the household, they don't ask the lady of the house, they ask the cook. The servants' quarters are their own bustling hub of information. Gossip is the household currency, traded with precision and care. Maids share notes about who received flowers, footmen compare observations from the hallways, and every new romance is dissected over cups of strong, illicit tea. News travels from attic to cellar faster than a dropped teacup. There are no secrets among servants, only varying degrees of discretion. Letters left out on the dressing table are read, analysed, and sometimes resealed with surprising skill. Hidden gifts are discovered, evaluated, and occasionally admired before being replaced exactly where you left them, unless, of course, the gift was a box of chocolates, in which case it might be 1 or 2 treats lighter. If a suitor tries to sneak a note through the kitchen, it will be read by at least 4 people and possibly corrected for grammar before reaching its intended recipient. You might believe you're the star of your own romantic drama, but the real audience is backstage, critiquing every act. The servants know your preferences, your secrets, and the precise moment your patience will snap. They're not malicious, just practical, experienced, and perhaps a little amused by the upstairs antics. And yet, for all their knowledge, servants are also your greatest allies. They'll cover for you when needed, slip a helpful word at the right time, and make sure you have just enough privacy to keep the story going. After all, in the great theatre of Victorian life, every hero needs a clever supporting cast, even if they do know a little too much. You're a man? Congratulations, society lets you do almost anything except cook. You're a woman? Everything is your fault. If anything goes wrong, you can expect a diagnosis of overexcitement, followed by a swift course of rest. Welcome to Victorian England, where gender equality is a work of historical fiction and social roles are set in stone, preferably by someone's great-great-grandfather. The expectations are clear from birth. Little boys are groomed to inherit land, wear top hats, and grow impressive sideburns, while little girls are taught to embroider, curtsy, and apologize for existing too loudly. As a man, your life is an open road. You can travel, pursue business, join clubs with names like the Society for the Preservation of Wainscoting, and make strong pronouncements about the state of the empire. If you're feeling athletic, you can fence, shoot, or spend entire afternoons taking exercise, which is Victorian for wandering around in circles and hoping nobody asks you to do any actual work. When evening falls, you can retire to the study for cigars and debate, secure in the knowledge that dinner will appear on time and your socks will magically mend themselves. What you can't do, however, is cook, or for that matter, admit that you have any knowledge of household matters. The kitchen is a mysterious domain, ruled by cooks with iron ladles and sharper tongues. Setting foot in the scullery as a gentleman is considered a sign of madness, bankruptcy, or both. You may be trusted to run the country, but not the range. Women, meanwhile, are assigned the role of society's scapegoat and emotional barometer. If a pie burns, a window cracks, or someone sneezes at the wrong moment, it's clearly the fault of feminine nerves. If a man gets a cold, it's the weather. If a woman gets a cold, she must have caught it worrying too much about someone else's cold. A man's quirks are charming, a woman's quirks are cause for medical intervention. Every misstep is subject to instant analysis. Women are expected to look demure, act serene, and never, ever sweat. If you laugh too loudly, you're unladylike. If you frown, you're sulking. If you show any sign of passion, you're in danger of hysteria, a catch-all diagnosis for anything society finds inconvenient. The cure? Rest. This means being confined to bed, fed milky tea, and prevented from reading, thinking, or, heaven forbid, expressing an opinion. Socializing is its own minefield. A man can attend the pub, discuss politics, and stay out past midnight without a second thought. A woman who lingers in the garden after sunset must be rescued, lest the moonlight do something scandalous to her reputation. At a dance, men can choose their partners. Women wait to be chosen, smiling serenely and pretending not to care. Even in matters of love, the double standard reigns supreme. A bachelor's wild youth is a series of charming anecdotes. A spinster's is a cautionary tale. If a man proposes and is rejected, he gains sympathy and, sometimes, a promotion. If a woman rejects a proposal, she risks becoming the subject of hushed dinner table discussions and a cautionary example for younger sisters. The greatest irony is that, behind closed doors, everyone knows the rules are nonsense. Men worry about feelings. Women are secretly hilarious and brilliant at running estates. Both are baffled by the opposite sex and suspicious that the other side is having more fun. But society insists, so the performance continues. Men puffing up their chests, women smoothing down their skirts, each blaming the other for the world's ills. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, give a little sigh for the Victorians and their elaborate charade. History may remember the top hats and crinolines, but behind every rigid rule was someone just trying to survive another day of double standards, with humour, patience, and maybe a secretly defiant wink. Tired of your own spouse? So is half the city. But beware, Victorian adultery is a one-way ticket to exile, public disgrace, and, if you're lucky, a dramatic fainting episode at the opera. Affairs in Victorian England are less about passion and more about logistics. Every tryst is a covert operation, coded notes, pre-arranged handkerchief signals, and the eternal struggle to find a room where the only witnesses are the wallpaper and a confused houseplant. You can't just stroll out for a midnight rendezvous. First, you must navigate a maze of chaperones, nosy neighbours, and servants with a sixth sense for trouble. The smallest slip, a muddy shoe, a crumpled collar, a glove left in the wrong carriage, and the gossip machine roars to life. Rumour is the air Victorians breathe. Everyone is watching, listening, and speculating. The moment a married woman spends too long talking to a handsome stranger at a garden party, whispers ripple through the rose bushes. If a man is seen escorting someone else's wife to the lending library twice in a month, the next day's tea is steeped in suspicion. You could be in love, or you could be discussing the latest installment of Bleak House. Either way, someone is convinced it's scandalous. For the truly daring, there's the thrill of secret correspondence. Love letters are penned in a fever of longing, folded with trembling hands, and delivered through a chain of intermediaries that includes at least one loyal servant and, occasionally, an unwitting butcher's boy. Each note is carefully worded. A misplaced comma could be the difference between undying affection and an unintentional confession. The letters are written in invisible ink, or at least in a handwriting so bad that only the beloved, and possibly their mother, can decipher it. If you do manage to arrange a meeting, the location is chosen with the precision of a military campaign. An empty museum wing, a hired hackney carriage, or a dimly lit opera box, all are favourite haunts for those seeking privacy. The risk is part of the thrill. Every creaking floorboard, every distant cough, could be the prelude to disaster. Many an affair has ended abruptly with a panicked dash out a side door, a hastily concocted alibi, and a vow to avoid the cucumber sandwiches at the next ball. And then, of course, there's the social fallout. If caught, the consequences are swift and spectacular. For women, a single indiscretion can mean social death, banishment to the countryside, whispered about for years. Her name used as a cautionary tale in etiquette books. Men fare only slightly better. Public scorn, the loss of club privileges, and a lifetime of being known as that fellow who caused the incident with Lady Havisham's poodle. Divorce is rare, ruinously expensive, and humiliating for all involved, requiring evidence and public testimony that leaves nobody's dignity intact. Still, the temptation lingers. The more forbidden the fruit, the more enticing it seems. Victorian novels are packed with tragic love triangles and misunderstood glances across crowded rooms. Poets compose sonnets to unavailable lovers, painters dash off scandalous sketches, and every now and then someone vanishes to the continent for a prolonged holiday, which everyone knows is code for awkward family meeting in Paris. Yet beneath the layers of secrecy and shame, a surprising number of affairs remain just that: secrets, never spoken of, never discovered, shared only in stolen glances and half-finished letters burned in the fireplace. Most people, it turns out, are more interested in imagining scandal than living it. So you tuck your love notes into the lining of your hat, smooth your gloves, and try not to trip over the family dog as you sneak down the hallway. In Victorian England, the heart may want what it wants, but it better want it very, very quietly. Let's step outside the drawing room. Victorian London had thousands of brothels and a booming market for French postcards. There are more sex workers than police, and the average client is wearing a top hat and a guilty conscience. Night falls, and the polite world of teas, calling cards, and scandalized aunts quietly gives way to the London that doesn't make it into the etiquette manuals. The city's cobblestone streets are lit by a haze of gas lamps, thick with fog, coal smoke, and the aromas of questionable fish pies. Here, down narrow alleyways behind respectable townhouses, flourishes a world of vice as organized and as busy as the Houses of Parliament. Brothels, euphemistically called disorderly houses or houses of ill repute, are everywhere, tucked between milliners, gin shops, and print sellers. Some are lavish, with velvet curtains, grand staircases, and doormen who look suspiciously like retired prize-fighters. Others are cramped, cold, and decorated mostly in peeling wallpaper and optimism. There are rumours of establishments where clients are greeted by a parlour pianist playing God Save the Queen. Subtle irony, considering what's about to happen upstairs. Sex workers themselves, known as unfortunates in the newspapers, are an essential part of the city's economic engine. They range from the infamous Covent Garden ladies catering to the rich, to women and girls who walk the docks and workhouses, surviving night by night. For some, it's a living. For others, a last resort. Every week, moral reformers publish new pamphlets detailing the shocking statistics and offering advice that's mostly ignored by anyone actually living on the wrong side of the gaslights. Meanwhile, the booming trade in French postcards, Victorian for racy photographs, thrives in the shadows. A secret code of shopkeepers, printers, and anonymous buyers keep the city's appetite for naughtiness well supplied. Some postcards are little more than women in slightly daring underclothes, but others are so scandalous they'd make a marble statue blush. Still, the more the authorities try to ban them, the more creative people get at hiding them inside hollowed-out Bibles, false-bottomed hat boxes, and the pages of respectable novels. As for the clientele, the city's best customers are those who blend in by day and slip out at night. Shopkeepers, lawyers, dock workers, even the odd member of Parliament. They skulk through the fog, coat collars up, hats down, hoping not to run into their vicar or, worse, their own wife's chaperone. There's no shortage of hypocrisy. Newspapers thunder about the fallen women while the people funding their livelihoods sip sherry at the club and write stern letters to the Times. Policing this underworld is a fool's errand. The Metropolitan Police, newly minted, shiny buttons and all, are hopelessly outnumbered, and most know to turn a blind eye in exchange for a few coins or the promise of a quiet night. Scandals occasionally explode into the open. A lord caught in the wrong room, a clergyman recognised by his umbrella, a well-born miss running away with her footman. But most stories end quietly, filed away in the city's collective wink and nudge memory. Yet even here, amidst the fog and the vice, humanity persists. There's camaraderie among the workers, a dark sense of humour, and a stubborn hope for something better. Charitable missions try to help, sometimes with success, more often with lectures and pamphlets. Still, people look out for each other, share a warm drink, and swap stories that would never, ever be told in the drawing room. So, as you tuck yourself in tonight, remember, while Victorian London's polite society blushed at the mere mention of ankles, the city's true heart was beating just as fiercely in the back streets and alleyways, where the only dress code was survival, and the only scandal was getting caught. Sleep well, and dream of a world where top hats, secrets, and French postcards all find their place. Every move you make is being watched by the neighbours, the vicar, and half the readership of the Times. Gossip spreads faster than cholera, and scandal is the national pastime. Welcome to Victorian England, where privacy isn't just rare, it's considered suspicious. Your daily life is less about living and more about being observed, analysed, and, if you're unlucky, written up for public consumption. The real law of the land isn't enforced by the police, but by the relentless army of busybodies who keep an eye on every window and an ear at every keyhole. From the moment you step outside, you're on stage. Your hat is at the wrong angle? 3 letters to the editor before lunchtime. Did you linger too long at the bakery with Mr. Smith? The local grocer now knows, and so does your mother-in-law, your sister's piano teacher, and, somehow, your childhood nemesis, who now works at the post office. Conversations are never really private, and secrets are as rare as a dust-free parlour. But the true power of public opinion lies in the gossip network. It's invisible but unstoppable, a living, breathing organism made up of tea, sympathy, and an astonishing lack of boundaries. The vicar's wife is the queen of the grapevine, hosting weekly gatherings where facts are optional, and embellishment is an art form. The more outlandish the tale, the more likely it is to be believed. Did you hear about Mrs. Forsyth and the undergardener? Neither did she, but now it's part of local history. Scandal is a spectator sport. Every week brings a new sensation. A love affair discovered, a wardrobe malfunction at the garden party, or the shocking revelation that someone attended the theatre on a Sunday. The local tabloid presses work overtime, churning out headlines so dramatic they'd make Shakespeare roll his eyes. "Lady caught with ankle exposed," shouts the broadsheet. "You natural passions at the choir practice," whispers the pamphlet left anonymously at your doorstep. And it's not just the print media. Town criers, barbers, and flower sellers are all part of the network. Children are unwitting spies, reporting the goings-on of the adult world with the innocent malice of those who don't know any better. If you so much as sneeze too loudly, expect to see yourself caricatured in the next issue of Punch, complete with a satirical poem. Reputations rise and fall on the whim of rumour. 1 minute you're the model of virtue. The next, you're whispered about at every tea table from Kensington to Cornwall. Women especially walk a narrow path. Too reserved, and you're cold. Too friendly, and you're forward. For men, a single misstep is written off as high spirits. Unless, of course, you cross the wrong person, in which case your social calendar is cancelled for the foreseeable future. Attempts to avoid scandal often backfire. Wear last year's dress, and you're frugal, or, worse, poor. Wear something new, and you're frivolous. Invite the wrong guest, and you're reckless. Don't invite them, and you're snobbish. There's no winning, only surviving, preferably with a stiff upper lip and a subscription to the Times, just to see what they're saying about you. Even the upper echelons aren't immune. Royal indiscretions, political blunders, and artistic experiments all get the tabloid treatment, ensuring that no one, no matter how powerful or proper, is safe from the collective judgment of the nation. The tabloids and broadsheets may have different fonts, but the goal is the same. Keep the kettle boiling and the neighbours guessing. And yet, for all the anxiety, gossip brings people together. It's the glue that holds communities, the secret ingredient in every church bake sale and charity raffle. It gives people something to talk about while waiting for the rain to stop. Sometimes, it even sparks a laugh, because at the end of the day, everyone knows that tomorrow, the spotlight will shift to someone else. So, as you lie back and drift towards sleep, give a little nod to the moral police, those tireless recorders of mischief and mayhem, who make sure that, in Victorian England, nobody is ever truly alone with their secrets. You're overwhelmed. So is everyone else. The only solution? Write your feelings in a secret diary, purchase a book with titles like Moral Improvement for Youth, and try very hard not to cry in public. Welcome to the psychological labyrinth of Victorian England, where emotions are packed tighter than a corset and self-expression is a skill best practiced in complete isolation. Outwardly, everyone maintains an air of calm, collected dignity, a nation of people whose greatest fear is not poverty or disease, but the shame of being seen blubbering into a handkerchief at the breakfast table. Feelings, of course, are everywhere. Regret over words left unsaid, longing for a forbidden romance, frustration at the impossible standards of society. The solution is not to confront these feelings, but to channel them into acceptable forms. That means stoic silence in public, repressed sighs at dinner, and, at the end of the day, a brisk walk in the rain to clear one's mind, which mostly just results in damp socks and more regret. Private diaries become emotional pressure valves. Hidden under mattresses and inside hollowed-out dictionaries, these notebooks are filled with page after page of unsent letters, secret crushes, and poetic laments about the futility of life. If anyone discovers your diary, you're doomed to a decade of awkward family meals. So you develop a handwriting style so cryptic that even you can't decipher your deepest secrets 6 months later. Enter the self-help book, a booming industry for a nation allergic to therapy. Shelves groan beneath the weight of volumes with titles like Hints for Self-Control in Trying Times or Practical Melancholy, a guide for gentlemen. These tomes offer advice for every conceivable dilemma. How to maintain cheerful composure while your in-laws overstay their welcome. How to avoid the dangers of excessive sentiment. And what to do if you catch yourself thinking fond thoughts about the scullery maid. Advice is always the same. Work harder, try more, complain less. Whenever you feel sadness, one manual proclaims, simply remind yourself of your many blessings and immediately cease all weeping. One best-selling author suggests plunging your face into a bowl of cold water at the first sign of emotional unrest, while another recommends gardening, letter writing, or, if all else fails, a dose of castor oil to distract you from your sorrow. For women, the advice is even more particular. Embrace your delicate sensibilities, avoid reading novels with unhappy endings, and strive for a cheerful disposition at all costs. If you can't manage that, there's always embroidery. Nothing like several hundred hours spent stitching Home Sweet Home to take your mind off the existential dread. Men, meanwhile, are urged to take up vigorous outdoor pursuits, join a debating society, or invest in a new hat. Suppressing your emotions is considered a mark of character. Even a hint of public embarrassment is best followed by an immediate move to the countryside and a change of name. But for all the rules and rituals, everyone is secretly united by the struggle. Behind every stiff upper lip is a swirl of doubt, remorse, and yearning for something softer. At dinner parties, guests trade jokes about the latest self-help craze, swapping books like contraband and reading passages aloud with just enough sarcasm to keep things safe. Even the sternest patriarch is known to sneak a peek at the young man's guide to contentment when nobody is looking. So you write your worries in code, dog-ear your favorite self-improvement chapters, and remind yourself that repression is the price of peace. Victorian society may excel at hiding its feelings, but beneath all those buttoned-up facades are hearts as messy and hopeful as ever. As you settle into bed and close your eyes, give yourself permission to feel a little bit of everything: regret, hope, and relief that you can cry in peace, even if it's just into your pillow. After all, the greatest self-help book of all might just be a good night's sleep. And yet, behind closed doors, some Victorians actually found ways to be happy. Secret romances flourished, coded love notes changed hands, and sometimes, someone actually had a good time even if the rest of society pretended not to notice. Despite all the corsets, chaperones, etiquette manuals, and dire warnings from Aunt Mildred, human nature always finds a way. Victorian England might look like a parade of rigid morals and repressed sighs, but peel back the heavy curtains, and you'll discover a society buzzing with secret joys and gentle acts of rebellion. Where there's a will, there's a way, usually involving a well-placed bouquet, a clever riddle, or a daring wink during church services. Start with romance. no matter how many rules were stacked against them. Sweethearts managed to send their love through 100 secret channels. Lovers became experts in the art of coded messages. A single pressed flower tucked into a borrowed book, a handkerchief dropped at just the right moment, or a note carefully concealed behind a loose brick in the garden wall. Even the language of fans, those elaborate fluttering gestures at the ball, doubled as a full-on Morse code of longing. A flutter left, meet me in the conservatory. A flutter right, the chaperone is gaining on us. It wasn't just the young and foolish either. Married couples, long thought to be doomed to lives of dull duty, sometimes conspired for little acts of joy, sneaking sweets under the dinner table, orchestrating impromptu picnics far from prying eyes, or simply sharing a rare, unguarded laugh in the quiet after midnight. Old love could be as rebellious as new, especially when it came with a secret stash of toffee and a talent for playing dumb when the vicar's wife asked awkward questions. Those brave enough to push back against the tide of repression became low-key legends. There were writers and artists, quietly weaving coded references into novels and paintings, hiding double meanings in sonnets, or sketching portraits with just a little more ankle than strictly necessary. Musicians composed waltzes with suggestive titles, and fashion designers snuck flashes of bright colour into otherwise respectable wardrobes. A scarlet petticoat, glimpsed beneath a sea of black, scandalous. Or simply a reminder that happiness is sometimes a matter of outsmarting the system. For the socially adventurous, there were private clubs, secret societies, and midnight salons where the rules of the outside world seemed to melt away. In these hidden spaces, ideas and feelings could be shared with just a little less fear. Here, conversations flowed more freely, jokes grew just a shade naughtier, and a forbidden dance or two set hearts pounding. Even for those without access to clandestine parties or private libraries, little rebellions happened every day. Someone lingered just a moment too long in the hallway, said something unexpectedly bold at dinner, or dared to laugh too loud at a scandalous joke. Some read novels banned by the local lending library, or wrote poetry that would never see the light of day, except in a secret notebook hidden beneath the floorboards. And so, for every prim and proper face on the street, there were hidden lives, beating hearts, and clever souls carving out happiness in a world determined to keep everything under wraps. The Victorians may have been experts at hiding desire, but they were also experts at savouring it, making the most of a shared glance, a stolen kiss, or the simple pleasure of breaking one tiny, ridiculous rule. So as you drift off tonight, imagine those hidden worlds, soft candlelight, quiet laughter, a secret pressed between the pages of a book. Because no matter the era, there's always a place for desire, rebellion, and a little bit of joy, if you know where to look. Sleep well, and remember, sometimes the happiest stories are the ones nobody dares to tell out loud. You're feeling bold and in desperate need of a wash, so it's off to the local bathhouse, which, in Victorian England, is more public utility than romantic escape. Forget candlelit soaks and rose petals. It's a crowded, steamy chamber filled with gossiping matrons, suspicious puddles, and enough chlorine to sting your ancestors. Privacy? The closest you'll get is hoping no one recognizes your ankles as you awkwardly scrub behind a privacy screen the size of a dinner napkin. Bathing in Victorian times is less about indulgence and more about survival. The bathhouse is a marvel of industrial-age engineering, but it feels suspiciously like being processed in a meatpacking plant. A hissing tangle of pipes delivers scalding hot water on Mondays, tepid drizzle on Tuesdays, and, by Wednesday, a polite sign saying, "Boiler out of order, please try sponge." You pay your tuppence, hand your clothes to an attendant who may or may not return them, and step into a foggy room thick with steam, noise, and the scent of industrial-strength disinfectant. The crowd is an ever-changing cast of local characters. Stern-faced matrons supervising their brood of children, shopkeepers with a week's worth of grime, and the occasional nervous bachelor hoping to blend in with the tiles. Everyone's pretending not to look, which means everyone is definitely looking, because nothing is quite as fascinating as a neighbour's elbow or the mystery of who owns those striped drawers hanging on the rail. Once you've claimed your square foot of space, the real challenge begins. Victorian bathhouses offer privacy screens, the width of a garden trowel, and the opacity of lace curtains. If you're feeling modest, you can angle your screen just so and attempt to undress with the agility of a circus contortionist. If you're not careful, the screen will fall over, revealing you in all your pale, goosebumpy glory to an appreciative audience of local gossips and one slightly traumatized child. The tubs themselves are no nonsense. Battered metal, lukewarm, and occasionally missing a leg. They're filled from a tap that alternates between glacier melt and boiling cauldron, with no middle ground. You slide in and try to relax, but the water smells faintly of lye, and the neighbouring tub's occupant is holding a conversation about bunions at full volume. The air is heavy, with a mixture of soap, cheap cologne, and the vague, ever-present suspicion that something died behind the radiator last month. Your fellow bathers are a chatty bunch. Privacy is not on the menu, but local news is. Marital disputes are aired out as thoroughly as dirty linen. Political debates rage across rows of soapy backs. And by the time you're rinsing your hair, you've learned 3 new recipes and the scandalous details of Mrs. Beasley's pie contest fiasco. The matron in charge makes periodic rounds, wielding a mop like a battle axe and dispensing unsolicited hygiene advice with the authority of a field marshal. Drying off is a team sport. The provided towels are thin, grey, and about as absorbent as a biscuit. If you forgot your own, prepare for vigorous chafing and the risk of accidentally swapping with a stranger. You retrieve your clothes, hopefully your own, and realize, belatedly, that someone has tied your boots together for a laugh. It's all part of the experience. Afterwards, you emerge blinking into the sunlight, feeling marginally cleaner but emotionally exhausted. Your hair is damp, your dignity is frayed, but your spirits are oddly lifted. You've survived the steam and the scrutiny, dodged the puddles, and heard enough neighbourhood gossip to last until next wash day. So as you wrap yourself in a sensible shawl and trudge home through the fog, remember, in Victorian England, cleanliness is next to godliness, but privacy is strictly optional. And sometimes a good scrub and a little communal chaos is exactly what you need to feel human again. It's time to confess your undying affection by letter, a risky move, since the Victorian postal system is less reliable service and more nationwide game of telephone. Your heartfelt prose might end up in the wrong hands, misdelivered, or opened by a nosy servant. Worse, what if your declarations of passion get published in the local tabloid, complete with dramatic illustrations and a scathing review from the town busybody? Romance in Victorian England is often a matter of timing, luck, and flawless penmanship. The quill trembles in your hand as you begin, careful to avoid any blots. After all, every ink stain could be interpreted as a symbol of impure thoughts. You agonize over your opening. Dearest beloved might be too bold. Esteemed miss too cold. By the time you finish, you've composed and discarded 3 drafts, 2 poems, and a haiku about her ankles. Sealing the envelope is its own minor drama. Do you use a drop of wax and your family's signet, risking recognition by every bored postal clerk and kitchen maid? Or do you trust in the humble gum seal which, according to local legend, can be pried open with a little steam and a lot of curiosity? You briefly consider sending your letter by carrier pigeon, but rumour has it that the vicar's cat is running a side business in intercepted messages. The next hurdle is delivery. The Victorian post is astonishingly fast for its time, sometimes with multiple deliveries per day, but it's also spectacularly unreliable. Postmen are overworked, underpaid, and prone to sorting letters by weight, colour, or whim. With hundreds of letters shuttled across the city daily, your missive could just as easily wind up at the local fishmonger as at your beloved's doorstep. If you're unlucky, it's delivered to her father, who reads it aloud over dinner and demands an explanation for your alarming use of the word sublime. Let's not forget the servants. The average Victorian household runs on tea, anxiety, and unfiltered gossip. The housemaid, tasked with fetching the mail, will absolutely hold it up to the light, check for perfume, and perhaps accidentally drop it for the butler to examine. If the contents are sufficiently scandalous, expect them to be the talk of the kitchen before you've even finished breakfast. If, by some miracle, your letter does reach the right hands, a whole new round of anxieties begins. What if your beloved isn't as discreet as you hoped? What if she shows your poetry to her best friend, who recites it at the next sewing circle? Or, heaven help you, what if the letter gets misplaced and reappears 6 months later, pressed into the pages of Great Expectations with a cryptic note from Aunt Gertrude? Found this. Please explain. Then there's the ever-present risk of the Victorian tabloid press. Editors are always hunting for fresh material, and there's nothing they love more than a dramatic declaration of love gone astray. One misplaced envelope, and suddenly your private metaphors for longing are front-page news, illustrated by an artist who's never seen your nose but has strong opinions about its size. The town busybody pens a scathing review, suggesting you stick to accounting and leave the poetry to Tennyson. Despite the dangers, the love letter endures. There's a certain thrill in putting feelings on paper, knowing that with every loop of the pen you're defying 100 unspoken rules. Maybe your beloved writes back, slipping her reply into your coat pocket at the next church picnic. Maybe she just smiles at you a little longer than usual, her cheeks flushed with conspiracy. Even if your letter goes astray, even if the whole village laughs at your rhyme for orange, you've dared to hope, to feel, to connect, if only for a moment, across the minefield of Victorian society. So you keep writing, keep sealing, keep dreaming, trusting that, someday, the right words will find the right heart. And as you drift off to sleep, remember, true romance can survive even the most disastrous mail delivery, especially if you keep a sense of humour and maybe a spare envelope hidden in your waistcoat. Victorian fashion isn't just for the ladies. Men are squeezed into waistcoats, starched collars, and hats the size of dinner plates. Seduction, for a Victorian gentleman, mostly involves adjusting your cravat, stroking your mustache, and trying not to pass out from heatstroke before you can say something meaningful. Eye contact lasts half a second and is followed by 3 weeks of mutual embarrassment. Let's be clear, courtship for Victorian men is less about suave confidence and more about not fainting during introductions. You start your day by getting dressed with the help of at least 3 different instructional diagrams, 6 buttons, and the unwavering support of your valet. Every layer adds insulation, which would be excellent if you were planning to winter in Siberia but is less helpful during a June garden party. The top hat is the crown jewel of awkwardness, a tall, shiny monolith designed to ensure you are always at risk of getting wedged in a doorway or blown off course by a sudden gust of wind. The real reason Victorians walked so slowly? They were counterbalancing several pounds of felt and bravado on their heads. Remove your hat indoors and you risk static electricity strong enough to lift stray lace doilies off the furniture. Then there's the cravat, a glorious but impractical strip of starched linen wound, tied and knotted according to ancient rites known only to haberdashers and possibly the Freemasons. The cravat's true purpose is to restrict blood flow to the head, ensuring that every social event comes with a hint of dizziness and just the right pallor of tragic romantic longing. But let's not forget the facial hair. The moustache is not just fashion, it's a lifestyle, meticulously oiled, curled, and shaped to suggest either artistic genius or mild villainy. For the Victorian gentleman, stroking one's moustache is the accepted substitute for genuine flirtation. It's a gesture that says, I have strong feelings, but also a strict grooming regimen. If you're particularly daring, you might attempt to twirl, but be careful. A poorly timed twirl can lead to wax in the eye and a reputation for eccentricity. Now, imagine the scene. You spot a lady across the parlour. You exchange glances. A thrilling moment. According to social protocol, you may now look at her directly for approximately 3 seconds, after which you must spend the next hour inspecting the wallpaper or making small talk about the weather with her aunt. If you manage to hold her gaze longer than that, her chaperone will begin writing angry letters to your mother, and you may be forced to relocate to Scotland. Small talk is a minefield. Your opening gambit, perhaps a compliment about the weather, her embroidery, or the general excellence of the cucumber sandwiches, must be delivered without stammering, sweating, or inadvertently declaring your intention to propose. Every phrase is rehearsed in your head until it comes out sounding like a legal deposition. If your mustache twitches at the wrong moment, you might be misunderstood as issuing a challenge to a duel. At some point, you may attempt a subtle gesture, a bow, a tip of the hat, or the legendary handkerchief drop, for advanced users only. Should you succeed, congratulations, you have initiated the next stage of courtship, a brief, awkward conversation followed by a fortnight of mutual avoidance. By the end of the evening, your collar has wilted, your hat has gone missing, and your mustache wax has melted. But perhaps you have achieved a small victory, a smile, a word, or, if the stars align, a shared joke about the punch bowl. You stumble home in the moonlight, pride and perspiration in equal measure, dreaming of the day you might have a conversation that lasts longer than the average sneeze. So as you drift off to sleep, remember, Victorian seduction was a slow burn, best measured not in heartbeats, but in hat sizes, mustache curls, and the silent hope that next time, your cravat won't cut off your circulation before love has a chance to bloom. Under the pious surface of society, there's a secret stash of literature hidden behind every dusty bookshelf. Officially, you're reading sermons and etiquette guides. Unofficially, you're sneaking glances at scandalous French novels, medical anatomy manuals, and sensational stories that could curl the vicar's wig. The thrill of discovery is only matched by the terror of being caught mid-chapter by your grandmother. Victorian England is famous for its obsession with propriety. But let's be honest, nobody can survive on a literary diet of moral improvement pamphlets and tips for keeping your silverware shiny. Even the most upstanding citizen needs a little spice, and fortunately the publishing industry is happy to provide. Hidden behind the complete works of Milton and 365 prayers for decent households lies a treasure trove of forbidden delights. Start with the French novels. Ostensibly improving your language skills, you're actually thumbing through pages of Balzac and Flaubert, blushing at scenes so daring they would make a wallpaper pattern seem indecent. The real trick is keeping a straight face while reading, especially if your grandmother is knitting ominously in the same room, eyeing you with the suspicion of someone who's seen one too many wayward plot lines. If she asks what you're reading, you reply, "Oh, just brushing up on my conjugations," while casually sliding a lace bookmark into place. Then there are the medical manuals, thick tomes of human anatomy, purchased under the pretense of academic curiosity. These books are strictly for the learned, but somehow, everyone from the scullery maid to the family dog seems to have a favourite chapter. Diagrams are pored over in candlelit corners, leading to much giggling, gasping, and a widespread, if incorrect, understanding of the spleen. Some particularly daring souls add notes in the margins, comparing the illustrations to local rumours or Aunt Gertrude's alarming list of ailments. And don't forget the sensation novels, the Victorian equivalent of binge-worthy TV drama. Wilkie Collins, Mary Elizabeth Braddon, and a parade of anonymous authors churn out stories full of mystery, betrayal, secret marriages, and villainous baronets. These are passed around at sewing circles, read aloud at slumber parties, and sometimes even copied out by hand for the benefit of the truly book-starved. To be caught with Lady Audley's secret under your pillow is a badge of honour, and possibly a reason to be disinvited from afternoon tea. Of course, there are the truly risque publications, underground pamphlets, salacious poetry, and books with covers so innocent they practically demand to be investigated. The more forbidden the title, the more elaborate the hiding place. Hollowed out encyclopedias, biscuit tins, or beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. Some families develop elaborate lending systems, complete with coded signals. Have you seen Cousin Henry's botanical manual lately? Ensuring no one is caught empty-handed when the bishop calls. For every book, there's an equal and opposite force of censorship. The government issues lists of unsuitable materials, the postman peeks inside suspicious parcels, and your local bookseller stocks the good stuff under the counter, available only to those who know the secret phrase, usually something like, "Do you have anything a bit more continental?" The terror of discovery is real. There's nothing quite like the adrenaline rush of hearing footsteps outside your door just as Captain Darcy is about to elope with the governess. You scramble to hide your book, grab the nearest sermon, and try to look engrossed in the finer points of duties of daughters. If caught, your only hope is to plead ignorance, blame French grammar, or feign sudden interest in Victorian plumbing. Yet, the risk is half the fun. Every stolen chapter is a rebellion. Every hidden bookmark a secret handshake between kindred spirits. And as you drift off to sleep, the forbidden stories mingle with your dreams, proof that even in the strictest age, curiosity always finds a way. So, tuck your scandalous novel under your pillow, make sure the coast is clear, and rest easy. After all, tomorrow brings another chapter, and with it, the delicious thrill of getting away with something you absolutely shouldn't be reading. So tonight, as you settle into your clean, cozy bed, free of coal dust, mothballs, and any judgmental chaperones, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your Victorian ancestors who survived etiquette manuals the size of phone books, beds that squeaked louder than streetcars, and medical advice that mostly involved fainting and hoping for the best. Take a breath, and remember, for every awkward ankle, every starched collar, and every love letter intercepted by a nosy maid, there were real people muddling through, just trying to find a little happiness between all the layers of linen and layers of social expectation. It's easy to laugh, and even easier to be grateful that modern romance, with all its apps and awkward DMs, at least doesn't require a special hat for flirting or an official vicar's permission to hold hands. So next time you're annoyed by a bad date, a weird text, or a moment of romantic confusion, remember that history is proof people have always been gloriously, stubbornly, and hilariously awkward about love. And somehow, they managed to survive, just like you. Close your eyes now, and let the distant sound of horse-drawn carriages and polite Victorian regret fade into the background. You're warm, you're safe, and you're living in a world with indoor plumbing and Google. Sleep well, and wake up grateful. You've earned it.